What's up, Ryuji here. We out here in Arizona State University. I'm here with Renée King from Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. She is the wife of an ex-cattle rancher, and she transformed that cattle ranch into a vegan sanctuary. And not only that, she's actually supporting cattle ranchers around the country in transitioning their cattle ranches and ranches, and their farms into vegan businesses. Probably like most people who are watching this actually know you. So for the two people who are watching right now who have no idea who you are, can you tell your story, where you came from, how you became vegan, and how you came to do the work that you do today?
Well, sure, Ryuji. Thank you for that. I appreciate your candor and your heart for this for animal rights. And you know what happened was I actually married my husband for the second time, and we were married once, and we divorced, and we remained friends. And 10 years later, I'm selling real estate, and he's got a ranch, and we married. And I moved in, and I wasn't prepared to fall in love with all the cows. I'm a city girl. You know, I wasn't raised on the ranch. I was raised in Houston. And so when I moved to the ranch, that was my first like inkling of what it was like to be around all these cows. I mean, because when you're, like I always say, when you're eating a ribeye, you're not supposed to, be friends with it. You're not supposed to be petting your ribeye and snuggling up with the T-bone steak. You don't do that. But what happened is when I was at the cattle ranch, I began to have feelings for the animals that we eat. And it became a real problem for me. Tommy wanted me to get more involved in the ranch, so I started bottle feeding a little baby named Rowdy Girl. And that's the reason why the sanctuary is called Rowdy Girl Sanctuary, is because of little Rowdy Girl. And a lot of people think I'm a rowdy girl, which that's fine because I'm pretty rowdy too.
She is. She is 100%.
But so it's all cool. And so I started feeding Rowdy Girl, and she started feeding me a line to the cows. So it was like when I would feed Rowdy Girl, I would be lost in like Alice in Wonderland. When you take a pill and you slide down a rabbit hole, and you go into a whole totally different reality. That's what it was like when I was feeding Rowdy Girl. I would actually see the cows, I'd see the babies, I'd see the community. I could tell that they had feelings. I could tell that they loved each other. I could tell that they wanted to live. For whatever reason, I never knew that before. And actually, I do know the reason now. It's desensitization. We're absolutely programmed not to have those feelings for those animals. And so when I started having them, I couldn't disassociate anymore. It took me 4 years, though, of having a lot of fights with my husband about the business. I didn't want to be in the business. And finally, I drew the line in the sand and told my husband, I said, I can't do this anymore. You take those cows up the road one more time, and I'm going to follow that trailer, and I'm going to buy them all back with your credit card, and I'm going to bring them all back home. And he was like, you stay out of my business, Renee. And I said, this ain't a business no more to me. This is lives at stake, and you're not going to do this anymore over my dead body. And he was pissed. Let me tell you, he was mad. He wanted me to leave. I wanted him to leave, and it wasn't happening, because if I left, he would have killed the cows. And if he left, he knew I'd have taken over, and I would have. And so we were at a standoff. And I convinced him after a couple of days to let me buy the cows and try to turn this place into a sanctuary. He didn't think I would do it, but I'd been talking to a guy named Kip Anderson, which a lot of people know. He's the producer or co-producer, director of Cowspiracy. Yeah. And he's on our board of directors, which he's been a really good mentor to us from the very, very beginning. And he was the one that told me that I could do this. I could raise the money on crowdfunding, and he kind of told me how to do it. And I had started a blog called Vegan Journal of a Rancher's Wife. And next thing you know, I went to my husband with conviction, and I said, Tommy, why don't you let me buy your cows? Let me buy them. He said, how are you going to buy my cows? I said, well, let me try. Let me try to buy your cows. If you were to sell them right now at the sale barn, how much could you get for them? He said, I think I could probably get $40,000, but how are you going to buy my cows? I said, just appease me. let me buy your cows. Let me try. So he did. And he said I could have them for $30,000. And I said, well, okay, will you let me lease the property for $1 a year, 2 years? And he said, sure, Renee, why not? So anyway, in less than 4 months, I raised the money. I raised $36,000 on crowdfunding, and I bought the cows. And my husband went vegan on May 2nd of 2015.
Wow, that's incredible. And when your husband went vegan, because you said that you started developing feelings for the animals. Your husband has been a cattle rancher for many, many years. Do you think that for him too, he also developed feeling for the animals, but perhaps he suppressed them, or what was your experience of him?
He always had feelings for the animals. My husband loves animals. That's why I know this about men like him, cattle ranchers. I mean, I know other people like him. His best friend, his partner, loved animals. And Tommy would not even do it himself. Like, he couldn't go out there and round up the babies himself. He would have his partner do it because he didn't like the process. It bothered him. And Tommy now really appreciates the fact that these animals never have to go to the sale barn. He'll tell you, that feels so good to me to not have to send them to the sale barn.
And you told me earlier too that Tommy told you to not name the animals.
Yep, he told me, because I started naming the cows. And after I went vegan, I wouldn't even stay home. I would, just hang out with the cows, all day long. I'd only go home when it was nighttime and I had to go to bed, because there was all those deer horns and everything in my house. And so I didn't want to hang out with all that. And Tommy, I was out there naming the cows. I was out there naming them every one, and I'd come home and Tommy would tell me, Renee, you got to stop naming them cows. You got to stop naming them. They're going to go to slaughter. And I was like, no, they're not. And they're not going to slaughter. It's not going to happen anymore. But yeah, so I started naming them, and Tommy was like, you don't name the cows you eat. You don't do that.
Right, and you also told us just now in the talk that your husband, Tommy, couldn't eat the cows that he had raised himself.
No, he couldn't. And that really, whenever I started having these feelings for the cows, I began to, I'm kind of headstrong. And I'm a little pushy sometimes. And whenever I start questioning things, I want to know answers. I'm not one of these that once I see something that should be different, once I know something is wrong, something ain't right, I'm going to figure it out. And I started figuring out, being around these babies, that there's something not right about what we're doing. I couldn't put my finger on it, because ranching is a cultural, traditional heritage. It's part of the American way. It's part of the global economy. And so how can you say there's anything wrong with it? But I started feeling like it was very, very wrong. And so when I started pushing my husband, I would say things to him like, why don't we eat our own cows? And he would tell me he didn't want me to ask him those questions. He didn't want to talk about that. He was like, don't ask me that. And I was like, but I want to know. Well, don't ask me that. I don't want to talk about that. Well, so maybe that day he didn't answer me. It was another day. I kept pushing him. Why don't we eat our own cows? How come we're doing this? How come we buy animals from, I didn't say animals back then, I do now. How come we buy meat from the grocery store and we, send these to the sale barn? And he was like, Renee, because I can't eat the cows that I know. And I was like, oh, really? That just really sounded messed up. So here we are, I'm already seeing that there's something wrong. Now it's really wrong to me. So not only, he can't eat the cows because he knows them. And so I start doing more research. I start doing more research, and I stumble on all kinds of things that continue to make me question.
And after you've spoken to many different cattle ranchers, after you transform your own cattle ranch, what have you found about those people?
What I found is that they all love their animals and kill them. And this is hard for most vegans to hear, because a lot of vegans think, I've talked to a lot of them, that think that, cattle ranchers are just insensitive, they don't have any feelings for these animals, and it couldn't be further from the truth. They really do love animals, they love land. They just have been sold a bill of goods through history that's false. And that's just the facts. And once they see, like my husband, once he finally saw it, it was life-changing for him. It's changed everything for my husband. And you know, the other folks we talk to, there's the cattle ranch right now that's transitioning as a 7th generation cattle ranch called Star Love. It's in Giddings, Texas. And we're working along with another organization called Farm Transformers to help change them. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the coming few weeks, actually. And so there's that one, and then there's a couple of cattle ranches that I know that are both plant-based, and they're still killing animals.
Wow.
Plant-based. And one of those families are members of ours. So they're a cattle ranch in Texas, killing animals, and a member of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. Because they love what we do, they believe in what we do, but they don't know how to get out of what they're doing.
Got it. You know, one thing that we talk about, or one thing that vegans get sometimes, is that people talk about, oh, you know, like, I agree that factory farming is really bad and that mass production of animals is clearly bad for the animals, it's clearly bad for the environment, it's clearly lose, lose, lose. But many of the ranchers that you are talking to are the actual ranchers that people talk about when they talk about, oh, the local organic farm, or, you know, I go to like small farms that are humane and things like that, and oftentimes we talk about it from the point of view of the animals, but I think what you shed light on is that these so-called small farms that are more humane perhaps, or it may seem that way, is not a win at all for the ranchers.
No.
Because they have to do something that they don't want to do themselves.
Exactly. They have to do the dirty work.
And also talk to me about the animals in those farms, because one thing that you told me yesterday, you said that, you know, we sometimes think that the animals in small ranches have better lives than animals in factory farms. Perhaps we could argue that, but you said that it doesn't mean that they have a good life at all.
Well, the thing is, they know, the reason why I say that is because what people don't understand is that animals know they're being farmed for food. Now, you might ask me, and so might you, well, how do you know that? Well, you know, I'm a very sensitive, intuitive woman. And the more vegan I am, the even more sensitive I've become. And, you know, these cows, animals in general, speak to us through their thoughts. They speak to us through their being. You know, we could speak to each other just by being who we are. We wouldn't even have to open our mouth if we would train ourselves to tune in to what's really happening behind the words. Because just because I'm talking doesn't mean I'm not, you know, I'm thinking first. I mean, somehow something's happening to make me want to say all this stuff, right? I don't know what actually sometimes compels me to say some of the things I do, but the things come through, and whenever I'm with the cows, I will tell folks, like when we're meditating with the cows, we enter their domain with reverence, and I want you to listen, tune into their heart, tune into them. And what I did when I went vegan and I was hanging out with the cows, that's all I did. I stayed in silence with them cows. I listened, I paid attention, I watched, I observed. Them cows know they're being farmed for food. And when they're not being farmed for food, they know it. They let me lay with them. They let me be with them. They put their heads in my lap. They stretched out their neck. I'll never forget the first time a cow stretched out its neck and let me stroke it. What I first saw was a knife slitting its throat. And I was just imagining how much confidence that cow had in me, how much trust, and how many of them get their throat slit every second, 3,000 or something, every second. It's just, it's heart-wrenching. Yeah.
And this question is for the next one, for vegan activists or people who talk to people, because many of us, and I have myself sometimes encountered people from the farming industry, and I have, for example, recently had a conversation with someone who owns a dairy farm, like a small dairy farm, the sort of rancher that you might have talked to. And so what are some tips, or how do you think that, as me, you know, because I have never been close to cattle ranchers, so I'm sure that when you talk to these people, they trust you because you are in their world. So what are some things that I can do, or what are some things I can say, or a way that I can be when I encounter, say, cattle ranchers, and I want to talk to them? Because let me tell you that last time when I talked to this lady, when she talked about killing her animals, she seemed like she was going to start crying. I could tell that she didn't want to do it, and I could tell that she loved her animals. She's like, I named my animals. She told me stories about different animals that she's had, this little calf that she brought up that she couldn't kill. And every time that she brought up killing the animals, she didn't even call it kill, she said, I dispatch my animals. It literally looked like she was going to start crying. So in those kinds of situations, how can I communicate in a way that's going to be effective?
Well, I get asked that question so much. How do I do this? Well, that's one of the reasons why the Rancher Advocacy Program was born. It's to help the ranchers out there, but another reason is to help activists, because we're developing education models, modules also in this, so that we can teach you how to do just that. We can show you how to go to these rural communities, with the Rancher Advocacy Program literature that we're going to have. I'm talking to Anita Kreitz with the Save Movement about how to develop, loving and kind vigils at cell barns. And we're wanting to create a model where activists can go into cell barns, not being rude or mean. Because when you go into a cell barn, you're going to go into a territory where there's a bunch of ranchers, and it's a different climate. But we're gonna be talking about and strategizing about how to do that, so that it's done in a way where there's respect, there's reverence, and we're there to relieve suffering for both the animal and the rancher. So we're going to be teaching activists these modules, and because it is so difficult without the real experience, it's hard to articulate. It's like a recovering alcoholic. One recovering alcoholic can really help another person struggling, and that's the reason the Ranchers Advocacy Program is working, is because we're recovering ranchers, for God's sake, right? And so that's what's happening.
Well, thank you so much. You're such a visionary in this movement. Everything that you do inspires me so much, and in particular, one thing that really stuck with me through our conversation throughout these past couple of days we spent together is you talked about how by transforming the ranches, you're cutting the supply chain. As an activist, I focus a lot on the consumers, and I focus a lot on talking to people and getting them to understand that a better choice for them would be to stop eating animals and animal products for the animals, the environment, and themselves, and being in alignment with their own values, and et cetera, et cetera. But you talked about how, when you get a cattle ranch to actually transform into a vegan business, you're cutting the supply. And I thought that was such it was kind of like a mind-blowing moment for me, because I was like, whoa, this is another approach, but it works on a level of the chain that I'm not familiar with.
Yep.
And I thought it was so inspiring that you did that. So is there any last words that you would like to tell someone who's watching this, that maybe you have some remaining thoughts or anything that you want to leave people with?
Well, I just want to always say that never ever give up. Always believe that you can make a difference. If there's cattle rancher families that and you want to help encourage them to maybe think of something different, send them to our website, rowdygirlsanctuary.org/RAP. That's where the Rancher Advocacy Program is. And just always believe that you can make a difference, because you do.
Yeah, and if Renee can make a difference in her cattle ranching community, then you can definitely make a difference in your family, because many people have given up on their families. I get messages very frequently of people who are like, my family is never going to change, my parents will never change, etc., etc. And seeing you transform your family, and really standing up in a way that's unapologetic, and transforming a cattle ranch and supporting other cattle ranchers transform their businesses, it really makes me think that anyone can make a difference in anyone's life, and we all have the potential to change.
Yeah, and there is a vegan world coming by 2026, so y'all stay tuned for that too, and follow climatehealers.org.
Yeah, so thank you again so much for this interview. Thank you so much for all these inspiring words. Hope you learned something. I'm sure you learned a lot. I'm sure you're very inspired. So thank you again so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Have an incredible rest of your day wherever you are, and peace. That was incredible.
Good.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Great.